The night she said she needed a husband by tomorrow was the night my quiet, broken life finally cracked open, because some moments don't knock before entering, they kick the door down and demand to be felt. I had spent years convincing myself that survival was enough, that loneliness was safer than hope, and that love was a luxury meant for people who hadn't already been worn thin by life. But that evening, standing under a flickering streetlight with snowmelt soaking my shoes and regret sitting heavy in my chest, I realized fate had a strange way of choosing the most unlikely hearts for its biggest tests. Before we go any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that broken lives can still be beautifully repaired, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope today, subscribe to the channel, and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. My name is Daniel Carter, and I was the kind of man people overlooked without meaning to. 32 years old, divorced, quietly raising the fragments of a life that once promised more. I worked long shifts as a building maintenance supervisor, came home to an empty apartment, cooked simple meals, and slept with the television on just to fill the silence. I wasn't unhappy in a dramatic way, just hollow in a slow, grinding sense, like a house with lights on but no one inside. Emma Lawson entered my life as nothing more than a neighbor who moved into the apartment across the hall, always polite, always tired, carrying the weight of something unspoken behind her eyes. She smiled the way people do when they're used to pretending they're fine, and I recognized that look instantly because I wore it myself. Over time, small moments stitched us together. Shared elevator rides, awkward nods in the hallway, helping her carry groceries when her arms were full and her mind clearly elsewhere. She was intelligent, soft-spoken, and carried herself with a kind of grace that didn't come from comfort but from endurance. I learned she worked in event planning, that her phone never stopped buzzing, that her family was traditional in ways that felt suffocating rather than supportive. She learned that I fixed things for a living and that my marriage had ended quietly, without betrayal, without shouting, just two people realizing love alone couldn't save them. We never crossed lines, never lingered too long, but something unspoken settled between us like a fragile truce with possibility. The night everything changed came unexpectedly. A knock on my door just after midnight, frantic and uneven, the kind that doesn't belong to good news. When I opened it, Emma stood there pale and shaking, clutching her coat as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. Her eyes were glassy, her breath uneven, and in that moment all the walls she'd built around herself had collapsed. She poured out the truth in fragments, about a family ultimatum, about a business deal hinging on her appearing stable and married, about a deadline that ended tomorrow at noon. It wasn't romance she was asking for, it was refuge. And without thinking, without weighing the risks, I offered her the only thing I had to give, a place to stay, a temporary life shared under one roof, an arrangement that would look real enough to satisfy the world even if it terrified us both. Living together began as a careful balancing act. We set boundaries that felt necessary but fragile, like lines drawn in sand before a tide. We shared space cautiously, learning each other's routines, discovering the quiet ways we coped with stress. Mornings were awkward at first, nights even more so, but something unexpected happened in the in-between moments. She cooked dinner when she noticed I skipped meals. I fixed the leaky sink she apologized for too many times. We talked, not about the lie we were living, but about everything else, childhood memories, failures we never admitted out loud, dreams we had buried because they hurt too much to keep alive. The more time passed, the less the arrangement felt like an act and the more it felt like two lost people finding shelter in the same storm. But pretending to be married isn't easy when real emotions start leaking through the cracks. The challenges came fast and unforgiving. Her family visited unexpectedly, sharp-eyed and suspicious, testing our story with subtle questions and loaded glances. Work pressures mounted, her stress spilling into tears she tried to hide, my own fears resurfacing as I worried about losing the fragile peace we'd built. I found myself caring too deeply, noticing the way her face softened when she laughed, the way she trusted me with her vulnerabilities, the way my apartment no longer felt empty when she was there. Yet fear kept me silent, because loving her felt like stepping onto thin ice, and I had already fallen once before. Emma struggled too, caught between gratitude and guilt, between the safety she felt with me and the obligation she felt toward a future she never chose. There were nights she sat awake long after I'd gone to bed, wrestling with the weight of her decisions, and mornings where her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. The lie demanded constant maintenance, and each day raised the stakes higher. Friends began to ask questions, coworkers congratulated us with assumptions that felt heavier than praise, and the deadline that once loomed suddenly passed, leaving behind an even more dangerous question of what came next. The turning point arrived quietly, without drama, on an ordinary evening that felt anything but. A power outage plunged the apartment into darkness, forcing us into the same room, the same silence, the same truth we'd been avoiding. With nothing to distract us, everything spilled out, the fear of being alone, the shame of needing help, the hope that maybe this wasn't just a solution to a problem but a chance at something real. There were no grand declarations, no perfect words, just honesty laid bare and trembling. In that darkness, something shifted, something irreversible, as we realized the arrangement had already changed us in ways we couldn't undo. From that moment on, we stopped pretending with each other, even if the world still believed the story we told. We chose to face the consequences together, knowing full well that honesty might cost us comfort, reputation, even family approval. Emma stood up to expectations she had never agreed to, finding strength she didn't know she possessed. I confronted my fear of loving again, understanding that safety without connection was its own kind of loneliness. We weren't perfect, and the road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time in years, the uncertainty felt alive rather than empty. As the days turned into weeks, our shared life became something genuine, built not on necessity but on choice. We learned that love doesn't always arrive with fireworks, sometimes it grows quietly in borrowed time, in shared meals, in holding space for each other's broken pieces. The world didn't magically approve, and challenges didn't disappear, but we faced them side by side, no longer hiding behind a story that wasn't ours. If this story is resonating with you so far, take a moment right now and tell us in the comments what you believe happens when two broken people choose honesty over fear. Near the end, as I look back on that night under the flickering streetlight, I understand that her desperate need and my impulsive offer weren't accidents, they were intersections. Life doesn't always give us love in the shape we expect, sometimes it hands us a responsibility and waits to see what we'll do with it. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that kindness can change the course of a life and that second chances are often disguised as risks, please like, comment, and share this video so it can reach someone who needs to hear it today. Because somewhere out there, two people are standing on opposite sides of the same door, afraid to knock, unaware that everything they need might be waiting just on the other side.